Okay, so today is August 2nd, 2019, and I am with my friends Christina and Ignacio, and they have been constant companions with me for the last year, defining and feeling what it is to be sovereign. One of the main words that I have been feeling more and more is the word non-aligned. And what's been coming up for me is that I'm starting to question everything. So in my video about sovereignty, I used the word non-aligned. And now I realize that what's happening for me is I'm watching all of mass consciousness, and I'm also picking apart the New Age holidays of the Lion's Gate. I'm picking apart, why are we being asked to meditate on the Flower of Life pattern, which was a grid for the Kali Yuga. And I asked one of my dear friends who is a geometry type of expert, what is the Flower of Life? And when we talked about it, I realized that I'm also non-aligned with the Flower of Life at this point. So I'm able to talk about that today if we get into that. I'm also particularly happy to hear from Ignacio, because Saturn and Pluto are traditionally masculine planets. And I'd like to know how it is for man to be non-aligned with mass consciousness. Particularly earlier, we were talking about how my partner, Claude, has quit his job. And there's this place right now of, who am I without my job? I'm not working out of fear, nor am I working to somehow be a doormat energetically to please somebody, nor am I trying to fulfill something that my father wanted for me, to be successful and not the garbage collector, nor am I trying to please the gods. So there's a really interesting part of this with Saturn being man and the paternal role that is changing, that I'd love to hear from Ignacio. Anything that's coming up with Saturn and Pluto for you, Ignacio. You were talking earlier about grounding something in your body.
Okay, so it was very strange. And I think I watched your video, your recent video on giving your meaning about sovereignty and to be sovereign. And all of a sudden I realized that I have this strong conjunction of Saturn and Pluto literally on my balls. I feel it strongly on my root chakra. And I don't really have to do anything about it. I just have to, I go outside, I look at the forest, and I'm being and feeling it and anchoring into the mass collective. It's like anchoring into the planet, but it's not the planet itself. The planet also is working with me to work with the collective. And the collect is like anchoring a staff. It's like putting your sword, it's like Michael's sword, on the ground, in the ground, and letting things go around it. Because when you, and that's the essence of sovereignty. So your chart or everything that you've said about the conjunction of the very important conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, and at the same time, everything that's going around, including Christina, how she's basically channeling and embodying sovereignty in herself. It's such an important point. I lost my track a little bit there. But the point is that I go outside, I feel that I'm anchoring this, like putting a staff on the ground, in the ground again, and allow for the collective to have a north. And that's a good point. It's like having a staff going from the North Star onto the center of the earth and allow for the earth to turn around there. that ties very well with what Claude is going through. Many people are going through the job situation and they don't know how to move out of enslavement, and at the same time be able to be financially independent, or be, financially able, be able to have your minimum shelter or whatever shelter you want, your food and clothing, and have your life and do whatever you're called to be doing. But I see many people rejecting that as a third dimensional structure that is crumbling, and it's going to crumble, and the ETs or whoever is going to come here is going to save us. And then what? We're going to be enslaved to the ETs then. So in essence, we are inviting the Anunnakis again, which actually they did a good job on us anyways. We see them negatively, but it's not. We had to go through what we had to go through. So I had my own path in getting independence from my work. And as Christina was saying earlier, the important thing is to gain independence from our own created identity related to work, and which is the one that anchors that in the enslavement. So for many years, working in corporate, I was fighting that and trying more and more to do things not to respond to emails on demand, but actually until I was feeling from inside of me the impulse to respond it. Usually in that way, I would step aside, come into alignment, as you may say, whatever alignment I was able to achieve or attain at that moment. You don't have to go all the way to the ninth dimension to figure that out. There is a point where you can connect with your guts and with your heart, and it gives you at some point the green light to respond to that email. And that email would normally naturally flow out of me, and it was perfect. And it was perfect in gear with everything else that was going on with the corporate. So the main thing is to break away from our enslavement in corporate, which we have in our own minds. Corporate is a non-personal entity. It actually does not exist per se. It's just an agreement that you may call among people to work and do something and function in a certain way. So as we free ourselves from our own enslavement in our minds, we're helping others to do the same in the corporate environment, and thus the corporate itself will be changing and moving on to the new age. But we need the structure because it's what provides for all of us to be functioning. I mean, what is it, 8 billion people? Do you want 8 billion people in chaos? I think we went through that in Atlantis already, where we couldn't, get our head out of our asses, and we caused the cataclysm. We're not doing that this time. So that's basically the principle on how we need to deal with our finances. Our finances are going to the money itself. Money is supposed to flow. Money is not to be gathered, but money, if we want to buy an avocado, then we look for an avocado, we buy it, and we pay, $2 for the avocado, and we move on. We don't question it. The same way, if we need to pay taxes, whatever, it's $2,000 that we have to pay. or it's $500 that they deduct from our monthly paycheck, so be it. We move on. It's like a game. Let's not attach meaning to that. Let's not attach judgment to how it works. And definitely, let's not get ourselves enslaved to that model. That model is there to actually enslave us so we can feel the enslavement and realize what is it that we are enslaved to and come out of that. Once we come out of that, we allow it to flow naturally, and it will flow to support everyone. And again, the basic purpose, or the main purpose that we have at this moment, is to realize that we have that sovereignty calling us. We need to hold that sword of Michael and anchor it. And we need to be ourselves. And that has to do with work as well. We can't just, pretend I want to just look at butterflies. That's fine. But if your spouse, has, and you have 2 or 3 children that you need to feed, and you have to clothe, and you have to provide shelter for, you have to realize, you have to learn to look at the butterflies while you're working in corporate or whatever other work that you have to do. You have to free yourself from your mind in that position. If you don't, you basically breaking down the structure that your own higher self has built for you to learn a lesson. And if I can do that, you're going to waste, another 5 years until you rebuild the same situation, until you deal with that then. So it doesn't make sense not to deal with yourself when you are in any situation. So the next thing is, we're not in control, really, of anything. The only control that we have is actually whether we want to align ourselves with our higher self or ninth dimensional self, or whoever or however high you want to go, while still keeping our feet on the ground, while still anchoring that sovereignty in the ground, feeling that sovereignty in your root chakra. Where was I? So we're not in control. So what we're in control is what we decide at each moment, how it feels. So I think it's very interesting, the experience that I have with my work with corporate. I was more and more detaching myself from an obligation of having my mind enslaved to a certain project or not. So the first thing that I stopped doing was doing more than I was asked for. And the second thing was to do it on my own timing. And the timing came from how I was feeling, how I felt on my belly. If I would tense up or if I would stress out, I would turn around and play solitaire in my computer on purpose. It's not procrastination, it's actually putting myself first. So I was doing that for the longest time. It was 2 or 3 years that I was in that situation, slowing down my involvement in corporate. At some point I told Christina, I want, eventually to sort of, how you're spinning wool or any fibers that you spin them, and it's very fat at first, and then you ended up having them on a string. And I was telling Christina that what I want with work is actually stream it down to a thread and just be paid for because of everything that I have done, for everything that I know. And I started more and more valuing what I knew and valuing my mind and myself. Well, there were a lot of happenings in corporate, and at some point last year, after we had decided already to move to Sedona, I got a phone call on Thursday morning and said that as of Friday, the next day, my job had been terminated. Okay, so I did go through half an hour of a shock, but that was it. Because there's always things there that you don't expect, and more than anything is the not to be seen, not to be seeing the value that you are by stupid management, that they are short-sighted or they just don't realize, so they feel, in competition, or they feel inadequate with me. So regardless, I dealt with that and I moved on. But the way my job was terminated actually allowed me to pretty much get a substantial amount of money from the company, like a severance pay. At the same time, I was already of age of retirement, so I retired. And to my surprise, the amount of retirement was better than expected. And then they told me I have 6 months payment in arrears. So they gave me 6 months Social Security. The government gave me 6 months of Social Security, plus the Social Security that was ongoing, plus the company gave me all the severance pay. So I ended up paying a shitload of money in taxes. So, you pay the money and that's it. Do I become aloof about that? No. We also were moved to Sedona. So we had the house pretty much ready to put it on the market when this happened. So the moment that this happened, 3 or 4 days later, we put it on the market. And a week later was sold. And looking back, I couldn't have done everything that we have done with me still working in the company. There was just no way. The way we got engaged with money, we had to fix the house that we bought. Stupid, mortgage company wanted me to have 3 months of proven, direct deposits from my IRA into my bank account, which later I was able to return back to them part of that. But that increased also, the income for the year was terrible. I mean, came April, we had to pay really a shitload of money in taxes for all this thing, but we paid it. The point being is that we're not really in control of how things work. All we have to do is actually let go, and all this year has been an experience of letting go of all beliefs that will stress me out. What is my function? What is my identity as a man to provide, to be able to sustain a household? Everything has gone out the door. A lot of that without actually much resistance. I actually opened up, once you start realizing that you're not in control, that these things are beautifully orchestrated, you sort of let go of everything that surfaces at any moment. So that goes back to pretty much the word that comes to mind is earning your balls. Sovereignty is not something that it comes freely. When we are in fifth dimension and higher, we are sovereign. But we have been projected down onto the planet into a third dimension or a fourth dimension with limited vision, so we can actually have the experience of bringing that sovereignty into the ground, aware. There's no point for us, there's no sense for me to do spiritual, and that goes to your flower of life, or to do all these things that are coming from the past, on where we were ruled by the age of Pisces, and the age of Pisces was ruled by the sixth ray of devotion, where there was a path to divinity, and the whole experience on earth was for us to regain our awareness of being divine while we were alive. But that's not it now. We know that already. Inside of each of us, we know we are divine. We know that we are full power, fully empowered. And it's only us who is limiting ourselves. So the work is different. That's why I love geometry. Geometry has been my passion since I was little. I had all these drawings and everything about it. And at some point I dropped everything because it didn't go where I wanted to go. Geometry is not going to give you sovereignty. Geometry may give you a fascination of how nature works. Geometry may give you an idea of how energies move or interrelate. But the coming of that ray from the Father, who we are, of the divine masculine, is something that we all have to do. We have to open up to it with the assistance of our divine mother, our divine feminine. But it doesn't end there. We have to allow also to that ray of will to come through us and allow us to be ourselves in full power. I used to tell many people, I have said it countless times, we all know many know the image that Kuan Yin has of riding the dragon. And it always fascinated me. I think it was like 40 years ago that I saw that image in the first moment. And what's allowing Kuan Yin to hold that vase with the flower on her hand and be blessing, holding the vase here with the flower and blessing basically life. And she's riding this serpentine dragon. What is holding her steady is the divine masculine that she is embodying. So it's the divine masculine that allows for the full bloom of the divine feminine. Oh,
there she is.
There she is. In any case, I think, so It's been an interesting conjunction, and I love it.
Yeah, thanks. What else do you want to tell me, Ignacio? Because I'd love to pull these threads forward. You keep telling me, though, anything else that's coming to you.
Well, as I said initially, I don't know what I'm going to say. But I think I said enough. I think I said plenty. I think, Christina always mentioned that this anchoring of the divine masculine is a decision. It's a decision because and what comes to mind is it's a mindful operation. It comes from your mind. It comes from your higher mind. The heart is open, but the heart by itself, open and being in love, and everything is love, is not enough. That's okay as a first step. In that state, we need to make a decision. Okay, I need to have a job. Or, if money is not coming to me and people are suffering because I'm not doing that, is the universe calling me to do something about it? It's not that we have to all go back and work, and that's absolutely not it. But we need to grab the bull by the horns. If if you're hungry and if you're in the woods and you don't find anything to eat except maybe catching a rabbit or a snake, what do? I suppose we can always go the Buddha way and, allow for the tiger to kill us so he can feed or she can feed the cubs. There's a scene where this saint is there meditating, and so he does that. A tiger female came and eats him because the cubs are hungry. And when he allows his body to be eaten, he sees the tiger, transform into Ganesha or Shiva, whatever deity. So, but that's a parable. It's seeing source in everything. I was going to post something that says, okay, so my divine male and divine feminine energies are balanced. Now what? What do we go next? And that's it. We have to be open to what's nudging us to do next.
Mm.
That's kind of it didn't come out very clear, but maybe I'm not supposed to be talking about that now. So how about you? Christina. I think Lalita first.
Yeah, I can always talk about anything, Ignacio. So there's a lot of things I want to pull forward from what you said so that anyone who may watch this, because we are recording, can first of all, feel Ignacio speaking. There's a real strong masculine presence, but also the vulnerability in the heart space that he's holding while speaking about his journey is profound. So I'd like everyone to just feel him when they're listening, because he's telling you a very profound story about how he let go of the mind part where he was responding to emergency email, no. Let me feel it in my body first. Let me know with my own free will when to respond. Because what Ignacio is talking about right now is how to get out of the enslavement that we put upon ourselves. And that's what I think that people have not really heard from me or my videos yet, is that clearly this was a game that we created for ourselves. And what Ignacio is saying is that our other expressions in the fractals and the higher dimensions already are sovereign. But the game is how to come here and play with the projected being that you are from your 9th dimensional self, and really root and anchor divinity into these forms without, like Ignacio said, being overly perturbed that you've been given last day notice. It's shocking, yes, but then there's this part of you that says, yeah, I'm not in control here anyways. The way that I am in control is to be able to look at how my mind responds. If my mind responds with, oh no, I'm not good enough, I'm somehow no longer a provider, I've been a failure in the company, or I was not acknowledged, that's the mind. And what Ignacio is saying is that when you're sovereign, the mind can be held in a space that you realize the larger game here. And the larger game is that in the 3rd dimension, we're playing with physicality, where we need to put avocados and toast on the table. And you know, what's also really profound to me is that in that example of the masculine holding up Kuan Yin, and she's able to then hold up the beauty of the flower, is that, for instance, if Claude were just to say, okay, that's it, I'm not working ever again, I understand that all the money is fake and this is all a slavery system, and I'm not going out to work ever again, immediately my divine feminine gets very anxious, and she goes, oh, okay, but well, I mean, we do need to be able to pay for gas in the car, and I do like to have a nice glass of wine at night. I mean, there's the divine feminine in me kind of needs that support from the masculine so that I can hold up the flower. And where man is right now is he is getting out of his own mind control, his own father's mind control. It's the enslavement game that we set up for ourselves, so that where it is really is in the details of, I'm not working because I'm afraid someone's going to yell at me, nor am I working because my money means therefore I will get more sex, which I think Christina could talk about a little bit because she was very, very clear on this. So what it is within each of us, in order to kind of break through what I call the matrix of the dependency system, is first to fix it in here. It's not just to be like, oh, I'm not ever going to have a job, because that's part of the enslavement system. Because then you're not anchoring that full sovereignty in this physical human spacesuit, that your 9th dimensional expression is going, it's a game, play it, play the game.
Yes.
Yeah, so now let's hear what Christina has to say about any of this.
That's very interesting, because one of the things that I got recently when I had a download that Lady Portia came in exactly about this a couple weeks ago. And that's the exact feeling that I got. But I also got the female role in this whole scenario. So one of the things that came through very clearly for me is that in order to have that full sovereignty, you have to be accountable for your decision to be here now. If you cannot own that you have chosen to be here now, it's very difficult for you to take that next step, because that puts you in a perpetual victim mode, like as if you were dropped here out of the blue. and I need to repeat this, we all decided to come here. We decided to be here. We decided to be willing participants in the game, and we are here to do the game as we see fit. So in other words, you need to free yourself of the game by owning the fact that you wanted to be in the game, in your co-creation of the game, so that you can then move forward. It's just, it's so, and if you don't have that initial feeling of knowing that this is your choice to be here, you're going to find yourself in that perpetual, someone's going to come in. I don't, whether it's a flower of life, or it's the guy down the corner who's, you know, selling something now, or the man who invented the little umbrellas that go in the drinks. And then the other thing is that they sell you, and you buy into this idea of, and it's, you need to, the focus of it is so amazing, because all of a sudden you start seeing all of these different formats coming your way, and it's the same thing being given and brought. It's almost as if each level of the game is a different version of the prior game with, you know, maybe more bells and whistles, but it's still the game. So this idea that, you know, I keep hearing, you're following your passion, you're following your passion, you're following your passion. Well, one thing is to follow your passion, and the other one is to realize that maybe you really suck at whatever passion it is that you want to follow. So what if you suck at your passion? Still do your passion, but understand that your passion is also being here, choosing to be here and grounding your being into this planet. That is first and foremost the passion. That's what got you here. That's what you wanted to dive into. That's what made you choose the parents that you chose and the circumstances that you co-created. And that's the passion. So when you're following into this idea that, you know, I can't participate in this organized system because I'm going to step out and follow my passion, I'm not saying not to follow it. I'm just saying understand that in order to follow whatever it is that you want to follow, you have to own all of it, including the system that you're moving away from, because it's part of why we're here. That is that sovereignty. That is that bringing that universe internally inside and allowing yourself to flourish regardless of what's going on outside of you. Again, we're back on the dragon again. And the scene, as Ignacio was saying, the scene of Kuan Yin going on the dragon is, if you looked at the whole picture of that, I mean, it's the statue in and of itself, but she's going through the whole thing. She's witnessing the poverty, the devastation, you know, the planet, the this, the that. She's witnessing everything that you can get triggered by while she's on that dragon. And the point is that she has to witness all of it, allow it, acknowledge it, feel it, and still move forward, and still allow herself to come into that personal union within herself to be able to be sovereign with it. That doesn't mean that you're ignoring it, and that doesn't mean that you're not, you know, caring about it. Actually, the full compassion is to really come into your own sovereignty and allow for that rest to happen, because when you do that, that is the way out of the matrix. It is really the way out of the matrix. It's by allowing it all to happen in its own divine form. So we will find ourselves being thrown, as you go through that, you'll find yourselves being thrown into all of these different ideas that'll come to get you out of that. And ultimately, you can do and get everything that you want, but you still need to do the work. And the work is still coming from your personal accountability and your personal realization that you are not a victim. You are not a victim of anything or anyone. And that's not an easy pill for many to swallow. It's a little jagged, a little bit of a jagged pill, if you will. But even as a woman who's watching at this moment in time, that's part of my journey, and that's me seeing things and owning up to all of it and then becoming my own person. But as a person who's engaged in a relationship and watching her husband go through that, where you can say, all right, well, you know, he doesn't have a job right now. I don't have my glass of wine. I really like my electric blanket and whatever it is that I like. And watching that anxiety kick in. And that anxiety is very, very important, because if you're not facing the anxiety that's coming in when your spouse or your partner is going through that, what ends up happening is that you end up in this perpetual cycle of anxiousness, because they pick up, you're not acknowledging of your anxiety, puts them in a situation of either wanting to hurry up and provide and feeling like further giving relevance to that role that was created. So all of a sudden it goes into, maybe my dad was right, I need to be doing this, or all I can do is be a garbage man because look how stressed she is. So those little moments that appear are those moments of conversation that take place, because it's that realization that he's going through something right now. Women who are in this process of being in a relationship with a man, where you are both sovereign beings who are choosing to be together, not needing to be together, but choosing to be together because we want to grow into something, you have to allow for that to unfold in all its form, and constantly voice your anxiousness, not from a place of fixing, but from a place of, listen, I'm feeling this right now, but this is part of what I need to be feeling. I'm just sharing that with you, and not go into mother mode. Because women will go into mother mode and try and fix or whatever. And because, you know, we've also been conditioned not only to be into mother mode, but to constantly make sure everything is balanced. It's almost like, there's a good example when you're training dogs, you know, when the owners are not in control of the house, the dog gets anxious. That's separation anxiety, and they get a little wonky because the pack leaders aren't doing their job. So me being able to express whatever anxiety, whatever fear of not being safe or being abandoned or being without or being whatever it is that comes up with me as a woman who has lived many lives and gone through this several times, comes up in that one moment of that phone call. Oh, you know, okay, here we are. We don't have work. We are having to pay the mortgage. You know, we have a big house. There's things to do. There's food to be put on the table. And I found myself having to just go into the moment of going, okay, relax. This is just not in my hands either. So as he was allowing himself to do that, I allowed myself to do that, because we both made a decision at that moment to step out of whatever roles were conditioned upon us and that we took on, because there it is again, that co-creation. So I stepped out of it and I just allowed it to be. And I literally remember standing in the kitchen going, okay, where are we going next? You know, how is this going to unfold? Just, I'm open to receive it. And that doesn't mean I wasn't scared and frustrated or whatever, but I acknowledged my scared and frustration and realized where it came from, because you come from a long line of women who basically have married men for safety. That's what they've done. They've married men for safety and security. And if you've married men for safety and security in the past, and your lineage has done that, which I don't know what lineage hasn't, you will have that in you, and it will be triggered. And our job at this moment in time, where we are in our development, is to address that, because we're here now to evolve beyond it, or we will continue to repeat it. And that doesn't mean that you can react to it and end up going into a reactionary line of, I have to become an independent woman, and I need to have a job and my own bank account, and I can never trust men again. And, you know, that rhetoric just continues to feed. It's the same, it perpetuates the same thing. It's, you know, it's mommy with a suit working at a job as opposed to with her apron working in the kitchen. It's the same woman in a different outfit, enslaved to a different thought pattern that lives within, because you're not addressing that DNA that is in you, that is coming up at this moment, so that you can become a sovereign being, interdependent, and be in a relationship out of choice, not out of need. And that needs to end. And it ends with me on my line, because I do not want to continue to feed that and pass that on to the women in my, even though I don't have any children, but I don't want to pass it on to my puppies nor to my nieces. So that idea of going through that in that moment actually brings the couple together, because then we can sit down and talk about this and that. Now, men have a different situation, because the reactionary rainbow that we have taken in all its different forms and colors, as we've bridged into that, is that there's a whole other level of fear that comes into them. As a result of this kind of conflict, they're also dealing with the fear of having to support women, because if they've been in past marriages or divorces, or if they had any sort of internal inclination that they have been married, that they have been entered into relationship with in order to have safety, or if they have done that inclination out of their idea of being the savior, there is a consequence to that, where men have also become afraid of women who, oh, you know, if she doesn't go do her thing and I don't go do my thing, I'm going to end up having not only to carry myself, but her, and then we're all going to drown in this pool. So there's other levels of fear that have entered into our new modern lifestyle as well. So as he was going through that, I had to just kind of sit, because the more I actually allowed myself to feel those feelings, the more I enjoyed watching him ground his balls. I just enjoyed it. And then I just saw him go, okay, he knows that he doesn't need to be saving me. And we can just realize and make that decision at that moment that we're in it together. But being in it together means everything gets on the table. So if there is any emotion or any insecurity or anything that comes up for me, I need to feel free to voice it. He needs to feel free to voice his, even if it sounds absolutely insane to me or whatever. Sometimes when you get it out and the other person hears it, it no longer allows itself to grow in your being. So as ridiculous as it may sound, you know, whether what came up for me at that moment was, you know, maybe I wasn't going to have a roof over my head. And because, you know, I come from people who are depression people and war people, and I lived with that. So I was ingrained into me that you need to have a roof over your head. I don't care what you do, but manage to have a roof over your head. So I needed to go, okay, that has come up. What am I going to do with this sensation of not having a roof over my head? And so we talked about it. He had his version of it. I had my version of it, but we both had to discuss it. And in discussing it, we realized that it doesn't really, you don't give that power, and then you're not working toward acquiring the roof over your head. That's just the symbol. You're working to become more of a union. Become more of a union of two people who have decided to walk a path alongside each other, who are walking each other home because they want to be together, and because they have this common goal of creating this life with each other, because that's what they want to be doing. And it's coming from within. And that does take sometimes a little bit of work. It takes sometimes to maybe figure things out, but you're figuring out, once you do it from that place of we're figuring it out together, we have full trust in each other. We know that when we do this, it's both. And if you really think about it, the system is set up for you to succeed as a couple. It really is, because you get more benefits if you're married, you get more benefits if you buy a house together, if you join your things together. And if you go into any of those things with fear of being lost from the other person, or not trusted by the other person, or having a savior mode, or wanting to be rescued, or wanting to have a sense of comfort. If you go to any union, I don't care if you do a job like that, or have a child like that, or have a relationship like that, or get a dog like that, or a cat like that, you are going to be faced with the foundation of your building being crumbled, because it's not coming from a place of the two of you realizing where it is, why is it that we're coming together? And you are coming together to grow. I have all my single girlfriends out there. They're like, oh, you know, they've said to me on many occasions, it's so much easier when you have a spouse. Okay, I'm going to say it right now. It's a whole other level of development when you have a spouse, because to be engaged with somebody to that level is to also be able to be open to all of the things that they come to the party with, all of their fears, all of their conditioning, all of that, and have this constant open discussion about it, where each of you are in realization that you're taking responsibility for that as individuals and coming together to work on this in a greater way. And that's not an easy thing to do. So it's best to be single with a goldfish and a puppy in the corner until you decide that you're willing to do that with somebody in your life, than to step into it, because then you're going to just bring in things to the party. And if you're still waiting to be rescued and taken care of, hey, it's not going to happen, because it's going to just crumble, because it's not coming from that authenticity of two people wanting to join to be able to make a life from that perspective, to build that foundation and to equally honor the support of the building that they're doing. So this experience that I had with him actually brought us together more, closer, because it was, hey, you and I, you grab that corner, I grab this corner, we're going to do it. And if I don't feel like I'm strong enough to do it today and I'm going to crumble, he gave me the space to do that. One of the things that happened to us that was really amazing is that we had to spend money. And I don't like spending money. I'm not cheap, but I am frugal. And I've always been very focused on making sure that I have this nest egg. And here I found myself having to spend the nest egg, and trust that I'm spending the nest egg in a way that was allowing for a whole other level of opportunity to open up. And I know that sounds really kind of funny for people to think, oh, so you're having this money and now you get to spend it. Yeah, it was not easy. It was not easy to have this little bit of money that had been saved. And then, you know, I had to go through the process of what exactly am I saving it for? Because, you know, I hold on to it, but I don't know what I'm holding on to it. So holding on to it out of fear is just as damaging as spending it out of fear. It's bringing in a whole other way of looking at things. So we went ahead and did it, and I had my meltdowns in the process, and I remember, you know, writing out a check and shaking, and but at the same time having that connection to my higher self enough that it said, it's okay, go ahead, write it, it's okay, go ahead, do it, you're going to be fine. And I did it, and here we are on the other side of it. And okay, now we're on the other side of it, and now we are looking at each other and going, now what?
Well, the point is to write the check regardless, because
right.
You have no control anyways. So
none.
What are you holding on to that money? It needs to flow. It needs to go to the other person that it's on the other side of the check.
It needs to flow, and it has to go to the other side of the check. And it's the process that we were going through, because we are coming from a time and an era where we were in a hoarding place out of fear. And so we are releasing all of that. Right now, most are not realizing that we are in the process of releasing all of the energies that had been accumulated and had pinnacled during World War II and the Depression. this is the energy right now that is coming to light for us to look back to and listen to, because you went from World War II and the Depression into the 1950s, where we ignored World War II and the Depression, and we were very, people were doing quite well, but there was also a lot of poverty at the same time. And then we broke into all of these different eras, into the 80s, in which we were spending like crazy, and then into the 90s. And we can keep blaming systems and systems, but these are systems of our creation. So now, as we stand here on this day, when we come to this realization of everything we create, accountable for being on this planet, accountable for our actions with each other, and we take that and we fully own it, now we can step into how it is that we want to unfold into the future in a place of authenticity, of pure trust, and of absolutely no victimization. No victimizing and not being a victim. Because if you are a victim to your circumstances, you're going to victimize the hell out of everybody around you. And that was my awakening. So enough of that. I hope that helps. That was the perspective I'm bringing to the party.
That's a mouthful.
That was a mouthful.
So I wanted to add one thing about Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin is known for her compassion. And compassion is an attribute of sovereignty. There cannot be compassion, true love, or true anything without sovereignty. And I think I PM'd you, I told you that I was looking for, I didn't like the word vulnerability, and it's so around us, it's everywhere that we have to be vulnerable. But vulnerable implies etymologically to be open to be hurt. And when you're sovereign, nothing can hurt you. When you are in that being and you are compassionate, you hold space, you hold everyone and everything in your belly. You feel it in your heart, and you see it with your third eye. And you don't do anything, because doing anything would be interference. It's interference with the sovereignty of everyone else.
Yes.
So when we understand that each of us is sovereign, whether we realize that we are or not, then we become at peace, because there's not much to do except to remain sovereign and do whatever you want to be doing at the moment. So that on compassion, that I wanted to add that point.
And then you don't need to enforce random acts of kindness. What the heck is that? If you need to do a random act of kindness, you're not being kind.
And you don't need to
It's
be apologizing.
politically correct compassion.
And you don't have to be apologizing to any collective for what another collective has done in the past. So.
Yes. Kindness is kindness. There is no random act. If somebody has to instruct you on how to be compassionate, then you're not being compassionate from authenticity. Then you're being instructed. It's like when people go to church and they force you to hug the person next to you.
So what to do after the divine masculine and the divine feminine are balanced, and you are anchoring and expressing sovereignty, and you are being it, what to do next? Just live our lives and be mindful of what we're doing. That's all. Be open to, life itself is going to bring us in contact with what we need to be doing at the moment. Period. We're not in control of anything.
And everything flows within that. letting people go, letting people come in, voicing your opinion, even if it's not something that is readily accepted. It's being able to have your voice. Right now, as we are claiming our voice, there are forces that want you to claim your voice under their patterns of what they believe your voice should be. That cannot be. So it's everything goes. To be spiritual is to allow all of it. It's not to be under some sort of systematic control of making everything look perfect. It's to allow all of it. And it's to allow whatever feeling arises in the moment. And if you're allowing the feeling to arise in the moment, then there's no aggression in that. The aggression comes from having to keep up with a spiritual identity or an ego that has been created. If you do that, then now you're going to have the most nastiest meditating people on the planet. And I've seen them. We've seen them. So I live in Sedona. I live in spiritual Disney. Trust me, I see them. So when you are in that place, you can start seeing that authenticity allows you to say no to what you don't want to say no to, participate into what you want to participate to, walk out when you want to walk out, and to question everything. To question everything, because questioning everything gets you closer to who you are, because you're not here to follow anything but your own inner voice. And when your inner voice is in perfect alignment with you, that is what you bring to the planet. You bring that. That's what you're anchoring here. Each one anchoring their own aligned inner voice, that beautiful, perfect, unique gift. And when you do that individually, then you can collectively anchor it. And there's no competition, there's no animosity, there's no vitriol, because everyone is allowing themselves to just be. And that is when you throw the me and turn it upside down and make it a we.
Well, let me just interject here so I can point out a few of the things that are coming forward that I want, if we offer this on YouTube, that people can really hear what Christina and Ignacio are saying together. So first of all, let's just go way back to when Christina started speaking about how we all chose to be here, that this is something that was not an imprisonment, but a choice to be here in this game right now. And if then everything that happens from that, everything that happens, including Saturn and Pluto coming together and possibly, well, from an astrological perspective, a lot of people losing their jobs because Saturn and Pluto are the end of structures. Mm-hmm. What Ignacio and Christina are talking about is those are the opportunities of the game because you chose to be here. So say, and I'm not saying any of this is going to happen, but when Saturn and Pluto come together, and this is something that's fairly rare, it might not just be some people going, I'm not going to do that anymore, or an employer saying your position no longer exists anymore, but like massive change of structures. And in that, we have opportunity to come very much together. So you can voice your anxiety, you can voice, you know, how are we going to do this? My collective fear of not having a roof over my head is coming up. And it's in that, what I call raw vulnerability or authenticity, that I am saying to you, well, how will that work exactly if we can't pay the phone bill? So we'll turn off the phone. But it's the communication that you have with somebody which brings that opportunity to crush and release those structures forever. Because what Christina's saying, because I know a political debate is going to happen just like this. Christina's saying, if the woman just says, well, I'm going to wear the suit now, and I'm going to go get the job, that debate is coming. I know that debate is coming very soon with a very strong feminist and a very paternal masculine being. and they want to pit man against woman. So this is part of the game too. Like one of my clients actually said, that's perfect. You've got two Illuminatis running against each other and trying to pit humanity against each other. This is another piece of the game that we should be going, woohoo, let's see through this also, and not be scared if chaos ensues and we have to ask some very hard questions and share our feelings. Now, another thing that I wanted to speak about in terms of sovereignty is Christina pointed out about the people who are meditating. And we were recently asked by a person that I do respect and have met personally, but he's a human being like anyone else, and he asked us all to meditate for the next 2 weeks on the flower of life. And it was like important, we all had to do this, we have to meditate on the flower of life because these other dark forces are potentially going to be trying to regrid the whole planet, and so we all need to meditate on the flower of life. So now a couple of years ago, the flower of life was fine with me, and I have a flower of the life upstairs, but this week the flower of life was not fine with me. I could not meditate on it. It just would not work for me anymore.
Because it's old.
Right. So I'm going to talk about that, Christina, because a mutual very good friend of ours, who I'm going to also have a Zoom conference with, who has been studying geometry her entire adult life and has written books about it. So I said to her, what is the flower of life? Why am I suddenly not able to meditate upon the flower of life? And she can speak for herself, but these are the notes that I recorded from her. The flower of life is the steps that were coded for humans to become breeder technology, to bring our organs to create more forms. So flower of life creates more forms. It's a motherhood technology. It contains also the program of the Akashic record karma. So therefore, there's also a code of technology for mortality and rebirth in it to resolve karmas. It's coded to the number 13, which just happens to be the 13 moon cycle. And the moon cycle, which some people argue is an artificial satellite, which it is in fact a satellite that does not spin like a planet, causes women to menstruate. Menstruation is also coded in this flower of life. And menstruation does not actually have to happen, nor do we need to be breeders. But this program and the holographic image of is found all over the world. It's in the pyramids, it's in Turkey, it's on floors of temples all over the world. And that flower of life was for third dimensional physicality to hold us in space, time, and gravity. And so meditating on it is a passive way of recoding yourself again and again for mortality and karmic rebirth and the breeder program of motherhood. Now, I'm not saying it's not in every flower. I'm not saying it's not part of a divine code or anything. But what I am saying is that being asked to meditate on these old forms that were definitely part of what I call the Kali Yuga are not even necessary anymore. And when I say that, I'm going up against hundreds of thousands of people who call themselves light workers who are saying, well, you must be a Satanist then, because how can you question the flower of life? And right there, I find myself in a fragile position, because when I assert my sovereignty and ask certain questions, traditionally, that's when you get killed, or you get accused, or you get outcast from society. So part of my sovereignty is that, yes, we're all able to express who we are, and you're all within me, and we are the same being. But there is this fragile space right now that I want all of our viewers to consider. That also deep in this code is that if you come up against somebody who's calling themselves a light worker and you question their meditation, you have this fragile place of, I'm not aligned with mass consciousness and therefore I may be killed. Now, all of us have to question every bit of that, because my galactic shaman astrologers are really questioning this whole thing with the Lion's Gate, which has become a new age religion. Oh, it's the Lion's Gate. We're all going to be embodied and so forth. And they happen to know that Sirius is aligned with our sun on July 6th because it's at 14 degrees Cancer. So they're going, well, what is this that everyone's talking about? And I'm going, they're just wrong. They're absolutely wrong. But it's become a religion of belief. And to stand outside of that, as all of the structures have to crash, including the new age matrix.
Yes, the new age matrix is the exact same thing as the same structure that they're trying to crush.
It's changing beautiful.
It's just the opposite. When it comes to the flower of life, you know, last year I went through Magdalene country. The flower of life has come up for me on, you know, quite a few different occasions. Here's the thing. You're talking to me. I don't belong to any club that has me as a member. I go with my gut. So if I see something and it resonates with me, I'll look into it. When it stops resonating with me, I move on. So I don't have anything. The intention of meditating on the flower of light is the intention of what this gentleman is speaking of is still coming from fear.
Yes.
Look at this fear. Oh my God, we got to meditate on this flower of life or all is going to shit. You know, if you're already coming in with that, that's already a signal for me that that's not coming from a place of, you know, of authenticity of your own thought. If you're coming at it that you're going to have to meditate on this in order to prevent this, that is just polarization with a really pretty geometrical design on it. And that, it just, when I see that, if it's producing anxiety or if you're feeling like, oh my God, I have to do this, or I have to participate in this, or I have to know this, that is already coming from another, that's coming from another alter ego level, something else being put into you to keep you enslaved to your own thoughts, to your own fears. One of the things that we're doing at this moment in time, as we start to question everything around us, when you question, again, you start to get to know who you are and how you want to be creating your own life, because you are the one who is the creator. No one else is. So you can meditate on that until the cows come home. If you're meditating out of fear, you're just bringing in more things to meditate on. Today it's the flower of life. Tomorrow it's going to be the tetrahedron, and the next week it's going to be, you know, I don't know, a deity of some sort, or the snake, or the eternity symbol, whatever. But if you're doing it from that place, you're just bringing in more of the same. So at this moment in time where we are, all of the systems that are crumbling externally is calling for the systems internally that are crumbling to be focused on. So when we find ourselves focusing on the external, to figure out, you know, oh my God, this is going to fall apart. That's going to fall apart. This is going to fall apart. It's just that proverbial mirror coming back up and going, what's falling apart in you? If it's falling apart in you, then something else is coming from it. And the only concentration that needs to be done is on what it is that you're feeling in every moment. How is it coming through you? What is arising? What's going on? Why is this facing me? Why is this, you know, making me feel this way? All of those tiny little things coming up is you doing your part. So meditating for me on something out of fear, what that is doing is taking you further away from the attention that you need to be putting upon yourself on what it is that is coming through for it to be resolved and taken back into the knowledge of the planet.
It's not taking responsibility for your own actions, for your own choices. Even I did a post that even astrology was built for the third dimensional beings. Is to there's no free will on third dimension. You have the representation of the third dimension is the Tao. You know, it's the vertical line with the horizontal line on top. Fourth dimension is when we have the little bubble on top of the Tao, which is called the Ankh. And the Ankh is the conscious human. So the Ankh, the conscious human, is the one that gets crucified on the cardinal crosses. There's 3 crosses in astrology. And we have to go through all 3. Once we're in the third one, actually we're in fourth dimension and we're free from that. When we realize that we're not in control and we just allow the spirit planets to rule whatever they need to rule through all the 12 hierarchies, creative hierarchies. But once you get into fifth dimension, astrology is no more. You are outside of that. You have a cat here.
I love the kitty tail.
I love the little tail.
Oh, it's so yummy.
So yeah, so even, you know, yes, use astrology as a meter, as a way of guiding you through the maze. I love the little tail.
The inner maze.
The inner maze. It's the inner maze, not the outer maze.
Yeah, see, the cat agrees.
And but many, again, they're turning it into a new religion. And that's not it. So sovereignty is the word. Sovereignty is the tenet for the new consciousness. Sovereignty allows for vulnerability and strength to work at the same time. Allows to everyone to be fully open. Anything else, it comes out of fear. Because it's fear, the one that produces the imbalance. That's simple.
Yeah. Well, I want to speak about that, and then I think that this is a really great closing because the recording is set for 1 hour and 30 minutes, but listen to what Ignacio is saying about the planets and the third dimension and the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension. So we know that the planets are stepping stones towards our free will. And what they are is kind of like the flower of life. Once you realize what the flower of life is, you don't need to meditate upon it with fear going, oh, we have to do this, we must meditate upon this, because that's another form of imprisonment and belief in the saviors of the geometry, that the geometry is a savior system. The thing about astrology, it is not predictive. It is the means to get out of the archetypes that you agreed to transcend. It's only about the ancestral healing that you're here doing. And once you get out of those archetypes, which Claude's major archetype is Hephaestus, and we know that, so we really explore that. And once you really make it conscious, throw it away, because then you're done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and the whole point of astrology, which if people read my blogs, is to continue to grapple with the questions that are being posed by the planets, grapple with them consciously, throw them away. It's just about being conscious, and they are kind of like stepping stones, but they're not defining us in the same way that I just wrote about Saturn and Pluto and this last new moon. It's the donkey's ass. It's the full stop. It's the end. It's the completion of time. And what I'm looking forward to is when we don't have to look at astrology anymore, when we don't have to study the planets, when we're in direct communion with our sovereign beings, experiencing our divinity in physical form. And that is going to be unique and diverse. Everyone's going to be different.
Right. And then all of those structures that are crumbling will not be crumbled. They just won't be.
Exactly, Christina. Yeah.
There's just no, it won't be, you know? So it leaves me with Jim Morrison, you know, who says we could either plan a murder or start a religion. So you decide which one you're going to be. Each one, they're going to lead you down the same path. So how about now just starting to look at yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a scene in a movie with David Carradine where he's seeking the heavens and enlightenment. So his guide takes him across the river in a canoe. And on the other side of the river, he punches a hole in the canoe.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you doing that? Well, you cross the river, you don't keep on carrying the canoe. And if you don't destroy the canoe, it will take you back to the other shore that you wanted to leave in the first place. So that's it. Yeah. So once you get the flower of life, destroy it.
Exactly.
Put it on your avocado toast, eat it, and then poop it out.
Yeah. It's
already there. It's already there. It's always been there. It's there because that's how it started, and then you move on.
I love you, Lalita, and thank you very much for this.
Yeah. Love you.
I had no clue what this was going to be when I told you we need to have a conversation. Yeah. But that was like 4 days ago.
Yeah, much love. Well, may all beings find their own sovereignty and enjoy expressing it with other beautiful sovereign beings.
Yes, and know that you're being supported in doing that. Every second of your minute and every breath you take, you are being supported to become that sovereign being.
And I want to recap what I said at the beginning, that this is the main purpose for us to connect, was to realize that we have a connection at that level and that we are keeping anchoring in the collective into that grid. We're doing it consciously, anchoring that sovereignty. And it's very good to have connected with you. So thank you again.
You can stop the recording and then we can